Throughout most of this training title, I have talked about dodging and burning. Well, in this chapter, I'm going to be focusing on what I call sister techniques, or different techniques that we can use in conjunction with dodging and burning, or we can just use it after the dodging burning, maybe even before, so we can prepare our image. And one of those, of course, is split frequency, like I previously mentioned in the last video. Now, the reason why I'm not going to go into everything about split frequency here is because it's a huge subject. Quite honestly, it's such a huge subject that we could create the entire DVD just on that. What I am going to do is I'm going to focus on the basics, and I'm going to show you what I like to do with split frequency and how I can benefit from it with conjunction with dodging and burning. So let's take a look. The way we split an image, I explained what that is in the previous video with slides. Now I want to show you what happens when we come into Photoshop and we actually need to do it. So basically we have our background layer. Now this could be any layer, it doesn't have to be background layer. We need to copy it. We actually need to make two copies from it. So I'm going to press Control J, or Command J. It's going to make one copy. And I'm going to click Control J or Command J once again. Now it's going to give me two identical copies of the background layer. Now I'm going to click on this one, the first one, and I'm going to call that one low, for low frequency detail, and this one I'll call that high. And this will serve as the high frequency layer and the low frequency layer, and background layer will remain our original. So the way we do it is I'm gonna temporarily deactivate the first one, the high level layer, and I'm gonna click on the low layer. Now what I need to do is I need to blur this image. There are multiple ways you can do it, but for this purpose we're gonna use blur, Gaussian blur. Now what I'm looking for here is just blurring the image to the point that I don't see all the small detail. So anything that I want to maintain in the low frequency layer, it's going to happen here. Now before I really commit to this and click OK, I forgot to mention why am I doing this. Well, what I'm looking for is on the side of her neck here, I have some hair that I would like to remove, but I would like to maintain this shape of the neck, all the shadows and highlights. So what I will try to do is divide the image into low frequency detail and high frequency detail. And I want to maintain all this hair in the high frequency detail while also retaining all this color and these shadows here and shadows here on the side, while keeping the highlights on the middle. What actually gives it the shape that kind of fits with the neck area. That's what I would like to do with this high and low frequency. So I will click on my low layer and I will again go to blur, Gaussian blur. Now here's where I would apply as much blur as it needed, so I don't see those individual hairs anymore, but I can still see these shadows here and shadow here, which represents the shape that I'm looking for. If I go further, I kind of start to lose most of the shape that I'm looking for. So if I go lower, I'm starting to see those individual hairs. So I'm looking for something in between. And I think 25, something that's pretty good, maybe 20 even. I think that's gonna work fine for this image. Yeah, 21 for instance. So I can still see now those shadows, but I won't see at this point all the individual hairs. And since this will be our low layer, anything that we clone on this low layer or heel, it's going to be without those individual hairs. And when we clone or heel on the high level or high frequency layer, we're going to clone just those individual hairs. And that's the beauty of this technique. That's the benefit of it. So for right now, I'm going to leave this at 21 pixels radius. And I'm going to click OK. And let's zoom back to 100%, or actually fit to view, maybe even better. So this was the original, and the low layer is just a blurred version of the original, nothing more. So the next step is we click on the high layer. I'm going to activate that one. Now remember, at this point it's still just a copy of the background layer, so it looks just the same as the background layer did. And now we're going to use the apply image command, and you do that by going to image, and here it is, apply image. Now this dialog would appear, and here now I can choose different settings. Now, like I mentioned in the previous video, these settings will differ slightly if you're using a 16-bit image or 8-bit image. This is an 8-bit image, I can see here that it is, and I'm going to use settings for 8-bit. Now, in case you're working on a 16-bit and you would like to change those, you can open up the previous image, the last image in the previous video, the slide, and there you will see clearly marked the exact settings you need to apply. So let's get back to our apply image command. Now here under source, I can choose if I have different documents for, in this case I only have one document, it's splitfrequency.psd, like you can see that it's definitely the only one opened. On the layer, I can choose different layers for that particular document. So I have 3 layers here. I can choose between background, low, and high. Now this is the important step. What we want to do is want to choose the high. The low, sorry. So you want to choose under the layer, you want to choose the low layer. Now that's the reason why I named it here, not only to demonstrate for you what I need to select and to kind of give you a better understanding of what I'm doing, but also once you get to this dialog box, there's no preview, even though it says preview here, but there's no preview of how the layer looks, so it's a good idea to name the layer. RGB channel, we can choose between different channels. We're going to stick to RGB. We're not going to use the invert command. We are going to, however, go under multiply and click on subtract. And I have already entered my settings here for this particular recipe to work, and that is under scale it's 2, and under offset it is 128, which is the half between 250 55, right? That's the from 0 to 255. That's the luminance ramp. I guess I explained that right. Anyway, so what we want to do is enter subtract under blending. We'll leave everything like this. Opacity 100%. The preserved transparency and mask are off. And under scale we use 2%, and for offset we use 128. We can click the preview and on and off to see what it did. And basically it's very similar if you were to use the high pass filter. The only difference is that once we apply this with apply image, the difference between the combination of high and low frequencies and the original is almost invisible. But when you're using a high pass for high, then you get a slightly different result. And I think this is a more accurate way to do it. So once I have entered all my settings, I'm going to click OK. And now all I have to do as the last step, I have to switch my high layer to linear light blend mode. And when I do, it's going to blend the high level of detail with the low. And combining those two, you will barely see the difference between the original. Now what I will also do is I'm going to select both of those layers by shift selecting them, and I'm going to Alt Option drag them to the new group icon. This will allow me to name it, and I'm going to paste a name that I already have in my clipboard, split frequency, and I'm going to click OK. Now let me show you, actually let me zoom first to about 50%. And I'm going to reposition myself here. So you can see if I deactivate this split frequency, almost nothing happens. I think you have to go maybe even here. Barely visible results. You can barely see that something is happening. So for all the intents and purposes, it's like the combination of these two is exactly the same as the background or the original layer. There is some very slight difference, but for our purposes, this is not necessary. So what I want to do is now I want to show you what I why is the reason why I split the image like this. So I can work on high and low layer if I wanted to. Now this is very good if you want to clone or heal certain areas, but there are other uses for it as well. Like I mentioned, we're not going to be using those, but right now I'm just going to first try to use it to defeat this problem here, like I already mentioned. So I want to get rid of all this hair while still retaining the shape of the neck. Now, just by using split frequency, this is a bit difficult, so I'm going to use another two methods, and that is color layer, as we already talked about, as well as dodging and burning. And that's what I really wanted to show you, how you can use split frequency along with what I showed you already to kind of get the best of everything. So if I Alt or Option click on this high layer, you can see that for the most part I do have some color in this layer, and I have most of those hairs that I want to remove, and that's exactly what I wanted. So I'm gonna start cloning and healing these skin pores here, which are also visible in this layer, all the way against over this hair here, without affecting the shadows and highlights which we see here in the low layer. Now the thing that I wanted to really show you is that not only can you do this, you can also, and I'll show that in some other example, you can also clone the different pores in the skin. So for instance, if I have a good pattern of skin here, and for some reason it's not enough good lighting or something, and I don't have it here, I can clone this, just the skin pores here. Or I can even borrow it from another image, and I'll show you how that works in the next video. So right now I wanted to just show you what I'm going to do to fix this problem. So I'll switch to my healing brush, or command, actually the default keyboard shortcut is J, and this is very important. Under sample, it has to be set to current layer. If you set it to sample all layers, or even this other option, it won't work the way we want it to, because it will sample also the low and the background, everything that's visible. What we want to do is we just want to clone what's visible on the high layer. And also, for this purpose, hardness should be set to 100%. And now I'm going to sample with my Alt key or Option key something from here where I have some good texture, and I'm going to start painting over this area, like so. And as you can see, it did retain most of the original shadow highlights while still copying one of those good and more clean skin pores. Now, if this was already dodge and burn all of this skin, then it will even be better. For this particular example, we don't need to do that, because I just wanted to show you what I'm trying to do. Now, when I get to this edge area here, I would like to now, instead of going with the heal tool, I'm going to switch to my clone tool, and same thing. I'm going to use it to current layer, and this time I'm going to use my hardness to 0%. I'm going to lower my brush a bit, zoom to this area, and I'm going to clone over this area here, and this area here, and then I'm going to clone over this area here. Okay, now let's see how this looks. This was, sorry, this was before, and this is after. This is before, this is after. Now the reason why I don't have all that much skin texture here is because I use the sample from here, and there's not all that much visible pores here. So if I were to choose another area, maybe this area, it would look a lot different. So let me try that. And also, before I do, I wanted to give you another kind of cool thing you can do with this. can actually copy the high layer onto its, you can just make a copy of it. So why don't we do that? I'm going to drag it to the new layer icon that's going to make a copy of it. We can retain the name copy. Now I'm going to clip it. I'm going to use my Alt or Option key and move my mouse between the two layers, and I will get this cursor change. And when I do, I'm going to click. That's going to clip it. Now at this point, it looks horrible because when we copied it, it retained the linear light blend mode. What we want to do is set it to normal. When I do, you can see nothing really happens. But this now allows me to have a kind of a backup of the high layer. And now I can clone on this one. And when I do or heal, I can just deactivate that one without affecting what I did on this one. So it's kind of like the backup version if you want to do it in 2 passes maybe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my heal tool, and I'm going to sample color. I'm going to sample some skin pores from here, and let me try to paint over this area so you can see. See what it did? It painted exactly that pattern. The problem is, of course, is that it just doesn't match. This is a way too harsh skin pores to match this area. So I'm going to undo that. But if I wanted to, I could do that. Maybe if I try to sample it from another area, like here. Let's see how that would work. I'm just sampling from, as you can see, this cursor here is actually showing you where I'm sampling from. Okay, now let's take a look. And since I did it on a new layer, now I can deactivate it. And it's going to show me the difference in the skin pores. But this is way too harsh. So I wonder what's going to happen if I lower the opacity of this and gradually bring some new texture into it to kind of have the best of both worlds. It's kind of nice, but I have some harsh transitions here. So I'm going to, this is another thing I wanted to show you. I'm going to create a new mask for this copy of the high layer, and I'm going to paint with black or these harsh transitions here that I got, so I can get rid of those, and I can just retain this texture, but it's set way too high here, so I'm going to lower my opacity. Now let's see how this works for right now. I managed to get rid of those hairs, and I did introduce some texture, but not enough. So the next step would be to, and I lost some color. So the next step would be to create a color layer, remember? So I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut Shift F10. It's going to create a color layer. Now I'm going to sample a color by Alt or Option, clicking on some surrounding area. Once I get this color, which matches the surrounding skin, I'm going to paint over this area. And that's going to bring back some of the original color that I would like to retain. And if this is too much, we can always lower the opacity, of course. Let's see the difference. Maybe it's too much, so I'm going to lower it to about 53%. And that's looking better. Now let's take a look at the before and after. Starting to look better, of course, but the problem we're having is this dark patches of skin. And I am sure you probably guessed by now we're going to use dodge and burn to fix that. So let me activate my action to create dodge and burn gray layer, and I'm going to use my brush now to fix those areas that I don't want, those darker patches. I could even create that help layer if I really wanted to see what I'm doing, but I guess for this purpose it's not that bad. Now remember, this is an unretouched image. If I were to try to do this when the surrounding skin was already retouched, I would get a lot better results. But I wanted to show you from beginning to kind of see there's no magic behind it, so you can see the entire process. All right, now let's take a look. What did we do? I guess we still have some more areas to work on. And I'm gonna switch to my burn tool, actually my black swatch, to kind of paint this area to give it a bit more shape. And I'm gonna use my white here to kind of extend this white line up here. Maybe even sample a color from this to retain some of the original color. And let's take a look. Before and after. Before and after. It's far from perfect, but because I was using it on the unretouched skin and I didn't do any of the previous steps, what I wanted to show you is that the way this works. And there was something else I wanted to show you. This area here. Now, what I would like to get rid of this, I could use dodge and burn to get rid of this, right? But I would like to try it with our high layer by cloning on it, actually healing on it, to heal this surrounding skin pores over this area. Now remember, I'm now targeting the copy of the original high frequency layer. And I'm gonna click to sample this area. And I'm gonna paint on this area. Now, interesting thing happened, as you can see. That black line remained because that's preserved here on the low layer. What I did copy is all the skin texture from these areas. I think that's even better example to show you how this works. I'm going to sample some more color to bring back some of the texture that I wanted, but not from here, maybe this one. And let's go over this area here. And now that we have done this, I'm going to click on my soft layer, soft light 50% gray layer, switch to my brush tool, and I'm going to just paint over this area, but I don't want to affect the color too much, so I'm going to sample some color from here maybe and make it lighter. And now I'm going to paint over this area here. I'm going to use some darker patch here, maybe darken this area, and I'm going to paint. Actually, I think I'm going to even paint some more whites on this. And as far as the color goes, well, I can use my color layer here. I'm going to even just drag it on top, so I'm affecting everything underneath. I'm going to sample some color. I'm going to paint over this area to really kind of blend in the color and tonality and everything. And I'm going to switch back to my dodge and burn layer because I see now that I missed this wider patch here. So, oops, I switched to the wrong tool. And I'm going to darken that a bit. Switch to my color layer once again, maybe even increase my flow here so I kind of transfer more of the color and do it like this. Now there's one thing that I don't like here, and that is how harsh it is here. So I'm gonna get back to my high copy of it, copy of the high frequency layer, switch to my mask, and I'm gonna paint with black to kind of neutralize some of the area that I just cloned. And since this is a mask and as you can see that I went too far, I'm just going to switch between my swatches and bring back some of that texture pattern that I want. So let's see how this looks. Maybe I went a bit far, so I'm going to paint with black over this area to kind of neutralize some of those repeating skin patterns. And let's see. So now if I really wanted to, I could pixel level dodge and burn this entire area, make it really, really smooth and skin. and really make it look better. But actually I'm just gonna work on just a few more areas here to kind of even out that to finish this what I wanted to show you. And for this, I guess after all I'm gonna need my help for dodging and burning. So I'm gonna create another layer. As you can recall, it's for black and white. I'm gonna reduce my red slider, increase my yellow slider, and collapse my adjustment palette, get back to my dodge and burn so I can clearly see the areas. And now I'm going to switch to my foreground as white. And I'm going to paint some over some of those darker patches just to kind of even them out to show you what I was trying to show you. And the whole point about this is that I'm trying to kind of illustrate the ways you can combine all of these tools that I mentioned plus this new one to work on your image. Now, whether would this be better if I did it after I dodged and burn or before? I mean, or before or after or during. That's going to be up to you. Some people use it before, some after, some during. I kind of use it every time I need it. Not anything. I'm not strict about when do I use it or not. So for you, it's entirely matter of choice. I don't want to get carried away and work too much on this area because that's not what I wanted to show you. Okay, now let's get back to, let's deactivate our help. And let's see before and after. So you can kind of see what I'm trying to accomplish here. I'm kind of retaining most of this texture, and even though it's not the original texture, in this case I didn't want to have the original texture. Just wanted to show you how you can even out an area using all these three techniques. And also something else I wanted to show you, low layer. Remember, it contains no texture, no small detail, but the shadows and highlights are there. So let's say I want to retain on this area just I want to get rid of this darker patch here, but I want to retain the texture. Of course, dodging and burning can work here beautifully, but to illustrate what I can do, I'm gonna click on my heel layer, and I'm gonna use my current layer as my sample point. I'm gonna select my low layer, which, as you can recall, no texture, just shadow highlights. And now I'm gonna click somewhere on this area, and I'm gonna paint over this darker patch. And you can see what happened, right? I got rid of the darker patch, but look at the texture. The texture is still here. I didn't remove the texture. Why didn't I remove the texture? Well, because the original. Now I'm watching the low layer. It only contains shadows and highlights, no texture. So it's similar when working on this. It's very similar to what you could accomplish when dodging and burning, but in some cases this is a better method because you might get in some tricky areas where dodging and burning, yeah, it is effective, but not as much. Besides, I also wanted to show you how we can even use the low layer. Now let's take a look before and after. This didn't turn out the way I wanted to because I guess there's just not enough skin texture here to make this look good. But at least I showed you the principle behind it, and maybe you can work on your images and try to be better at it. What else? Is there anything else I can show you on this image? Oh yeah, right, I forgot almost. I'm gonna collapse my split frequency group. I'm going to deactivate it for a moment. I'm going to click on my background layer, create the new blank layer, and I'm going to use my healing tool. I'm going to set this to sample all layers so I can show you how would I try to work on this without the split frequency. I'm going to sample a point here somewhere. I'm going to work on this area. Actually, in this case, it worked very good. It even worked, some might argue, better than the attempt with split frequency. Especially if I click on my clone tool, set it to sample all layers, and now paint over this area. Here I have a problem. I'm not painting when I'm using this clone tool. When I'm painting, I'm not actually only transferring the skin pores, I'm also transferring the lightness values and everything. While when I worked on split frequency, I was only transferring the smaller details, like skin pores. So this is, well, while I was working with this one, it kind of works better because healing tool is designed to blend the texture and everything with the surrounding texture. So I guess in a way it's a more intelligent approach. So that's why it worked better. But when I get to this area close to the edge and I try to paint, it's going to pull out this darker edge and it's going to blend it with this other edge, and it's going to create that annoying transition that I'm sure you experienced before. That's also something you can avoid when using the split frequency, because you're not cloning all the color and darker patches, you're only cloning the small detail when working on high frequency layer, of course. So that is what I wanted to show you.